Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kirkpatrick Podcast. It is Vanessa Alzate, and today we've got our VP of Organizational Excellence, Dr. Amy Heaton back. Hey Amy, how are you?
Fantastic today. It's nice fall weather up in the mountains. I'm not sure what you know about seasons in Florida, but here we have, leaves that fall from trees.
Okay, I'm from Jersey. We had seasons. And I'm going back to Jersey for Halloween. So I will be back in the cold. But I do definitely prefer not being in the cold weather literally ever again. So when we do our team retreat, it has to be down here in Florida. I will not come to you.
Understood. As long as there's paddleboarding as a team exercise, right?
I don't know if my core can handle it, but I shall try. I will be in that water probably more than I am standing, and that might be laughable. Well, today, everyone, Amy and I were kind of chatting about the podcast and just some of the things that have been really attracting the audience and where their interests has really been. And it's been a lot around, cracking these codes around level 3 and 4 and like, how do we show impact? And Amy, you weren't here about 20 minutes ago, but I was just recording a podcast about, not just thinking about the impact of your individual programs or even your portfolio, but what has been the impact of your function, right? Like the L&D function on the actual employees of like the organization, on actual humans. Like how have you helped to develop them, help develop their careers and things like that, where sometimes when you just do program evaluation, you don't get those stories always. And I think that's also a valuable metric to turn over to your stakeholders. Because it's not just about a specific program, but really the whole person, right? And that's a huge impact that you could have on someone that you may be missing. So that brings us to kind of what we're talking about today. One of the things you and I talk a lot about is ROI, and what exactly do we mean by ROI? What kind of investment are we talking about? Or, are we talking financial, right? There's all of these things. And so what we started, we obviously know at Kirkpatrick Partners, we've always talked about return on expectations as, really the ultimate indicator of value. And so now we're also evolving that into return on performance, which you were able to unveil at the summit, more about the return on performance, but also this bigger kind of concept. But I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, if you could explain for the audience a little bit more about return on expectations and performance and how it's, kind of that conversation is being elevated or enhanced.
Yeah. So maybe I can take it back to like our original discussions around return on investment, right? So we get a lot of people that come to Kirkpatrick Partners either through the website or because they know you or through LinkedIn who are saying like, we need a way to measure impact and it needs to be ROI. And I don't think those two things need to be linked, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can measure impact, but it's impact on what? And like, what do you actually want to use that number for? So if people need a return on investment, sometimes they're looking for like a numeric value to justify budgets. Mm-hmm. But Vanessa, do you think that like helps them to understand what to improve specifically at the granular level? Just if you get a number back that says you did this training and we calculated that this is the increase of productivity by self-report, which is usually how ROI is calculated.
Yeah.
What does that tell them about whether they hit their expectations for their stakeholders or their performance metrics, right? So I'm actually volleying it back to you to say that ROI discussion we have is because it's just giving you a number. Yeah. But we always talk about how what does that number do in terms of improving your L&D?
Yeah. Well, actually, great question and very timely. So I just had a conversation, with our friend Ray, one of our partners.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, can you explain to me evaluation, the importance of it? Like, I was like a fifth grader. And he was like, yeah, can you explain it to me? Like why it's so important? He's like, because when I talk to customers, they're very burnt out on creating training content. It's, and like, that's where he's like, they're not even thinking about evaluation because I have to create all this content to create all this content. So like to your point, and so what I explained to him is like, the only way to get out of the content development cycle is evaluation. You have to know what is working and what's not. And, I was giving him, Ray was former Army, right? And so I was giving him this example of someone from the Marines who was saying he's doing a presentation and he brought out this like book of all of his like policies, procedures, and like all of these things that he still had from when he was a Marine. And he's like, I don't recall a lot of things from training, but this book I still have and was what I referred to. And so what I was explaining to Ray is, the importance of evaluation and the reason back to your question, that the number doesn't tell you anything is like, you're not going to get off the content hamster wheel if you don't know what of these things that you're doing is actually making an impact. The training program that this Marine went through didn't have as much of an impact as this book did. Right. And that book probably cost a lot less to develop and a lot less to create, but its actual impact was astronomical. And so if you don't have that data, you're never going to be actually hitting the right expectations. And like, if you think about at the end of the day, what did the stakeholder who asked for that training in the Marines, what did they really want? They wanted people to be safer. They wanted them to return home. They didn't care about necessarily how that happened, that they just wanted, their warfighters to come home safely and know what to do when they were faced with something. Yes. That was it. It was just the book. That's a different metric of success. 100%.
Right? That's a totally different metric of success. And I love that you pulled out that illustration because we work a lot with the government and we do work with the Department of Defense and, Navy, Marine Corps, and ROI, return on investment, was originally developed to look at financial return, right? And often, like the military, for example, is like you're saying, like in the business of saving lives, whether it be like in a national security way that we're protecting all of Americans, or like we don't want anyone to get hurt or killed during training or during actual operations. So if you are just measuring whether or not a training program worked using a financial return, which is really developed oftentimes by interviewing folks and asking them, what do you perceive about your own self-report, right, of your change in productivity? But guess what? Productivity is not the only thing that matters to clients like the military. They need optimization of performance. They need effectiveness of their soldiers, not just efficiency. So, we started, like the way I saw this ROI thing is like, I remember we did a deep dive one weekend. I think it was before our summit. And, ROI was developed for like during the Industrial Revolution, when you had widgets being created on a conveyor belt, right? So if you do an intervention like, okay, we're going to train people on how to do this one little thing different, you can see that like, okay, for this many inputs of units of whatever the material is, we're now getting 20% more output because we trained them to do something differently. And now they can get more done in a certain amount of time, things like that, right? Very clear, like point A to point B causality, because it's just a machine that you're measuring the efficacy of, or a machine being driven by humans. But now we're using ROI to look at like these really complex systems of human systems, right? So a person in and of ourselves, like of oneself, is very complex, right? Like psychologically, like we've got all these things going on. Your life is very complex, meaning that like, while I'm taking a training program, I might also be watching my kid at T-ball and hear something that their coach says to them that really clicks with something I've noticed on the job. I might also watch a YouTube video on how to like run off-grid solar batteries, right? And like that'll have some sort of connection to something at work in terms of like how they're saying to do process or safety checks, right? you can no longer hold constant the inputs into a human brain, right? So we're talking about going from something that was inputs into a conveyor belt. And now we're using that metric to look at all these complex inputs from all kinds of different contexts into a human brain and expecting that we can like make an assumption on what the impact is on that person's behavior because of what we put into their brain, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. So when you asked the question originally around return on expectation and return on performance, I know you wrote about these in the book that you just finished editing. So you can probably foot stomp this a little for me, but we started to look back at like Wendy and Jim's work on return on expectations, where they're saying, I think I'm not going to get the quote wrong, but it's something like, if you manage to align to your stakeholders, you can almost never be wrong as L&D, right? Because you are talking to them and having your stakeholders define what the problem is that they want solved, and then co-creating a solution, meaning that you're deciding together that training plus policy plus changing the environment and all these different things are how you're going to get that return on expectation. So if you have a certain problem, it's not always training. It's not always training alone. And then if you work with the stakeholders to define return on performance, you're working together to say, hey, we need to see this problem fixed in our organization, right? So that's our expectation, is that problem should get fixed, however we fix it. Be it training plus or whatever. And then we're saying, so what are the critical behaviors that we hope that intervention will change? And then what is the critical return that we expect to get on performance? Would you add anything to that? I'm not sure I'm really putting it in clear enough terms.
No. So one of the things, the way that we've, so if you are listening, you're familiar with the Kirkpatrick foundational principles. So we've added 3, and we've updated some of them slightly. And one of them is this ROE foundational principle. And the way that Jim and Wendy defined it was ROE is the ultimate indicator of value, right? Because this is what's of value to your stakeholders. And ROP is the ultimate indicator of effectiveness, right? Like, how effective really were you? Are people actually changing behavior? Okay, 2 things. One is very me right now, to take us off track for a moment. But every time we talk conveyor belts, I don't know about anybody else listening, but I keep thinking about the episode of I Love Lucy where they're on the chocolate conveyor belt and she's popping the chocolate in her mouth. That's just me. But the other thing I was going to say is, so the other reason that in my belief, ROI, I don't think I've ever said this to you, is no longer a true indicator of like effectiveness or impact, is also because our workplace has changed so much. And people are before, I don't think there was a lot of investment in people at organizations, because it was more of a badge of honor, right? To say, like, your dad worked for Michelin, right? And so he worked for Michelin for how many years?
39 years or something.
When do you hear that anymore? Right?
It's so true. And you know what? That was always an argument with my parents. They'd be like, why do you job skip every 2 years, every year, every 2? And I would get so much pressure to stay. And, they had this, like, that generation of this loyalty to the company. Like, I was supposed to be loyal to my employer and stay with them and we do not hear that anymore. In fact, you're urged to jump every 2 years, or you won't be getting those jumps in salary, and you won't be like really, getting your resume updated. Nobody wants the person who's been in place for 30 years. You're seen as not lacking innovation, right?
Exactly.
Total flip.
And so with that, now the onus is more on the organization to show, well, what are these benefits that we can give people? Like, what do you gain, so that we can at least retain people for a little bit longer than 2 years? And that's where I believe, everything is all these benefits. It's also kind of carrying from the last episode, but all these benefits you kind of top out at, right? Like, likely you're never going to make it up to the same salary as the CEO. So when it comes to like health and wellness benefits, those all have like a pretty big cost, but learning doesn't necessarily have as big of a cost like those things do, or it could be more creative and people still feel like they're gaining this value from the organization and like they want to stay and things like that. So we're not calculating in that sense an ROI, like a financial return, like, what we're calculating is you're having people stay longer. Can I attribute a dollar amount to that? Yeah, sure. We know what turnover costs and things are. Right. But at the end of the day, it's really about, because of these programs that we're doing and the impact that we're having on people to help them perform and feel more confident and perform and feel like the company is investing in us, they're staying. That's a very different metric or different return on investment than just a financial.
Like, so no one really measures the deprecation of your culture. Like, if it's a place where people churn through people, I've just worked for places like that where you come in and they're like, yeah, people don't stay here long. Yeah. And you start to hear all these things and like, it's like, it starts to change your expectations and you start like immediately looking for other work the second while you're like working your regular job, you're constantly looking for a way out because you've been told like, oh, people don't stay here. We're hard on people. We churn them out. Like right. You can measure, what it costs to onboard a new person, what it costs every time you lose someone, how it costs to find a new person to fit that in terms of interviewing and HR costs, blah, blah, blah. But that piece around how does this affect, the workplace culture and the mindset of the people? How do you get at someone's inefficiency on the job because psychologically they feel no safety, right? Are we measuring that with ROI? Like, I can tell you for certain when I've been in that position, I start to bring my best self to my own resume and leave it there and not bring my best self to that organization. Right. And how are you calculating that squishiness of like, I'm only coming and showing up with 60% of my best ideas.
Right.
Or energy,
or
right?
people that are like quiet quitting. I guess that is like the definition of quiet quitting. And like, how does that, impact the organization? Like there's no calculation of that, And so when folks want to know more about like the ROI of, a program or their work, I definitely, can we come up with a calculation? Yeah, sure. Is it ever going to be this to, a direct?
Yeah, it's almost like not useful for anything. Like, so what? I gave you an ROI. What are you going to do with that? Okay, you can use that to justify getting more funding for next year's program, right? For the L&D budget.
Well,
that's about it. But
I don't believe
that. Is that C-suite's still coming back and being like, but we still don't see your value. We got this number. Because guess what? We all know it's Swiss cheese data that you're building it on. And we all know that it's a vanity metric. Well, they feel it in their gut.
You know why they feel it? Because there is the number that's sitting in front of you. And there's the actual things that they're seeing.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
And the number and what they're actually seeing and maybe hearing from those that are going through your program, they don't add up. Right. They don't match up. So there's somewhere there is some form of, disconnect. And so that's where, in my opinion, like, I don't necessarily like that number is like, okay, sure. We'll give you that number if you really need it, but just know you're still not sitting on something that is to share your word, defensible, right? Yeah. We can poke holes at it all day. And that is the job of the CFO is to look at that number that you're giving them and poke every single hole in it because they're on the hook for the budget and those decisions. And at the end of the day, they're going to protect themselves, their division, their job, and their work over, just trusting the ROI that you give them. And also, here's the other thing I will say about this. I know you're not the best math person. I can math.
Wait a minute. Let's talk about how you know that a little bit. Like,
wow.
Every single time that there's a budget number that comes across or a proposal, it has to go through you, right?
Right.
You've seen me do math, and you really don't want me to do math out loud, right?
No, never out loud.
Like on the spot.
Right. But that's, I mean, like I did math in school. Like I was, a good math student, but to like a point, not to a point where like I'm crunching numbers, you know what I mean? I got into instructional design and learning for a reason. That's why I didn't have to do math. Right. And so when we're trying to calculate this ROI, like, are we even calculating it right? Do we know how? Like, is that really the best use of our time? Those are like kind of all the things that also like run through my head.
Which is why we have Dr. Analytics to help us out, right? So I know, like, so part of this process for the audience, like we're developing something called an integrated return with a data analyst and psychometrician who is professional with a PhD with a math background. And she knows what she's doing and is guiding us. And so we have started to develop something called an integrated return, which is based on your return on expectations, your return on performance, and then something we're calling contributive ROI. And then by mapping it, we end up at the integrated return. It is really some sophisticated math that's behind it. And the idea, I think, is to get this done automatedly by a tool that we're developing, right? So that people don't have to learn the math. Yeah. But the idea behind the contributive ROI is that, look, we're complaining about, or we're trying to hold constant variables or to get baselines. Like that's the typical quantitative lens, right? When you set up when people talk about research, they think quantitative, they think experimental design, they think power analysis, where what's your sample size to get statistically significant XYZ, and to what degree of confidence. We can do that in this integrated return model, but we're basing it on qualitative research, right? So you can get your survey information, but we're also doing, interviews, we're doing like focus groups, and we're taking that qualitative research in so we can triangulate data and get some better patterns out of people's narratives around what they think is actually going on. That's much deeper than just asking them, what do you think is your increase in productivity since you went through this? And then being like, this is a 10x, impact on the organization. That's really how ROI is usually calculated. So I think that if you say contributive ROI, we're saying, hey, let's get back to the T-ball coach and the, like, maybe you're taking a leadership thing on the side and there's a technology rollout on the company at the same time that you're taking some other kind of training that's specific for a task on your job. And researchers want us to come in and hold constant variables to know that it's just that one training on that one task in their job that made an impact. And we're saying there's all these other things that contribute. And that you have to take into account that might have also bootstrapped at the same time that knowledge and that critical behavior change and then the return on your performance. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. I don't know if that's where you're going with talking about math, but I am not going to unveil the formula here.
No, I mean, the formula
to go through the math, but no, I think it's sophisticated.
It is. And I think, what I'm saying about the math too is like, is that really the best use of our time and our energy and our resources to calculate this number, really the best use of our time is to uncover what's working and what's not. So when we're asking for to develop, we're given a problem, we can actually show up and say, well, when we're given the request, hey, we need training because we're having this problem, we can show up with the data to show, hey, training's not going to solve that problem. But however, we had a similar situation in the past, and here are the things that help to fix those things. So let's look at what's going on with your problem, and let's really diagnose then what is the right intervention. Right? It's like, look, my husband thinks that a Z-Pak will cure literally anything and everything.
Is that the antibiotic that's so strong?
Yeah. So like every time, like a tickle in his throat when we lived in Jersey, my best friend was our doctor. He would, text Teeny and was like, hey, can you send me a Z-Pack? And she's like, oh, what are your symptoms? Like, what is the actual problem? A Z-Pack may not be, you might just need the cream on your elbow or something.
Right. Like, I need sleeping pills, actually.
Right. The Z-Pack isn't going to be it. Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's, you don't want to continue to treat the symptoms. You want to actually get to like the actual problem. What are the different things? It's never just one root, right? It's multiple things that cause a problem. And let's look at all of the things in the environment and are they optimized so that someone could be successful to perform. And if the answer is no, you're going to start to uncover, when they get back out on the job, they're being told everything they learned in training is not accurate. We don't do it like the way that they taught you. Oh, they don't have access to certain resources.
Yeah.
Oh, the system that you're asking them to learn is actually really buggy. So they just avoid using it. It's not the fact that they don't know how to use it. They just really don't like using, putting their notes into the CRM because the CRM is clunky and unusable. It's nothing to do that they don't know how to do it.
That's how I feel like you told
No,
that
I'm going back. No, that is my CRM background. It's my sales background. But it's all of these other things. It's not the fact that someone doesn't know what to do. And you've seen us talk about this. The Rob Brinkerhoff study, and it says it's from his book Telling Training Story, and it was whenever there's an issue with performance, 70% of the time it's not an issue with training, it's an issue back on the job. I mean, that's and then I asked him when I met him.
Implementation of training, right? Applicability of training?
No, it's an issue in the performance environment, whether it's the manager, the super, the lack of support, right? The lack of psychological safety. And so when I asked him, when I first, I've met him a bunch of times. And so when I first met him, I was like, what's the update? Like that was 2006. And he was like, there is not really much of an update. Like the numbers are still the same. And if you think about, we're right around the corner of 2026, this is 20 years later, Amy, we still haven't fixed that problem, right? Or really addressed it.
Right. And it's like, it's a situation of like ROI for what? Like ROI. I'm sorry, I'm a linguist, so I have to make a little bit of a and then my millennial brain, you just said ROI for what? And so I started thinking in my head, turn down for what? Turn down for what? I can't remember the song. Yeah. It's like, why are we doing all this work to get an ROI? Because at the end of the day, it gives you no information. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's been built on Swiss cheese data. It's something that you're using to justify budgets, but that it actually doesn't tell you how to improve the actual problem you started out to solve. It doesn't tell you whether or not your stakeholders are going to be happy with your training because you didn't do stakeholder alignment as part of it. Written out stakeholder alignment. What is the stakeholders' problems? Who are your stakeholders? Mm-hmm. What do each of them think their ecosystem of problems are? Then what do we do in terms of like changing as critical behaviors that they help us define, return on performance? If we don't add that into the narrative of what your return is, then the ROI is almost a useless, just vanity metric that serves no real purpose. It doesn't tell you how to improve the training. It doesn't tell you how to fix the culture. Mm-hmm. And when you do these qualitative research, when you add that to our mixed methods, you pull out so much more rich data around those, whether you hit the expectations and you hit the performance. Mm-hmm. And then you don't have to keep backwards engineering from return on investment to but what went wrong? We can tell you. We know. We can look at instructor to instructor, delivery method to delivery method, time of day that we delivered, time in the career of a person, what role they were in. Do people at a certain level like this kind of training, but it doesn't work for these people? You can tell all this level of granularity that then helps you impact the bottom line. Yeah. Rather than pretending that that you're impacting the bottom line.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to the fact is that we're not doing our right due diligence if we're only giving the patient what it is that they've requested, right?
Oh, that's it. You nailed it. That is exactly it. And that is the problem when L&D gets in trouble, because we're on the hook to fix the entirety of a company, right? By just training a few people. But we're going like, hey, wait a minute. We should have learned to consult up to C-suite or to the GS15 SES level. And if you can manage expectations, but like really like actually be in the room when the conversations are taking place to decide if it is an L&D problem or if it's L&D plus we need some other stakeholders in this organization to also take some responsibility and be on the hook for other things.
Yes.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Now, so doctors have to take a Hippocratic oath. Do you think that we need a Hippocratic oath? It's an L&D, like
do no harm, right? It starts with do no harm. That should actually be everyone's like, I was thinking about the other day as I was driving through the mountains, like everyone in their life should have that as like their life goal, to do no harm first, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, here's the other thing. I think I've mentioned this in a previous podcast. I don't necessarily know, if if a stakeholder comes to you and like says, I need training. And when you if you respectfully have that conversation with them, right, and consult up to them, I think that sometimes they say that they want training. They don't know what they want. It's just the word that they know, right? And
we're just trained to think that like training is the answer, that it's like, you got to upskill, you got to do this. And it's like, you can upskill them. But like, if you don't also change your policies, if you don't change who you're recruiting, so many times it's a talent management pipeline problem that you didn't get the right person in the right job. You looked for skills instead of personality and fit.
You're going to love this conversation that I had the other day. So I was chatting with someone that once I went at the Training Mag Network webinars I did. And she just wanted to, just wanted to learn more. And she works for a very large accounting firm. And we were talking about, like how do I engage managers, like, help their employees when, transfer training to learning. And I said, well, here's one thing I'm going to say. Is how many of those are the right managers, especially in the accounting world, right? Like you get into accounting because you just want to work with numbers. You don't want to work with people. But in order to get promoted and to get a higher paying job, your only real option is to then take on managing people, which is the thing that they want to do at the very least. And if I have a really long list of things to do, I'm going to prioritize by what are my strengths, what are the things that I like to do. And if managing people and having these like critical conversations and like coaching and molding someone else is not something I want to do, guess what I'm going to bump to the bottom of the list into like tomorrow's to-do list and like next week's. It's going to be all of those things because we're promoting people that never even wanted to manage other humans. And then we're saying, you better be the best manager out there and mold these people. Like, how fair is that?
That is, that also speaks to a lot of the problems in academia. It's one of the reasons I defected from academia after 1 year as a professor. I could only take it for 1 year. It's like, we're never given any training. Like we know how to do this one specific thing that we studied. Very, very minute niche thing. But no one ever says, here's how to manage projects. Here's how to manage people. Here's how to manage budgets. Here's how to write proposals. You're just expected that you got a PhD. Well, I guess you can read a book and figure out anything from now on. Like we're sitting there going like, hey, we don't have the people skills. Yeah. Right. And so like, to your point, like people don't, it's, when you see department chair of linguistics, you think, if you're outside of academia, it looks like, oh my gosh, for this chair, they must have been the chosen one. But really what happens is everybody has to rotate that burden. At some point in the department, someone gets yoked with that burden of being the department chair. No one wants it. It's a hot potato no one wants because your job turns into all admin and no content. And across every sector, private sector, academia, government, if you have people that don't want the yoke of moving up into admin, then there's no amount of training that's going to make them good at that because their heart is studying leaf cutting ants in Costa Rica and how their saliva can help make webs that could be used to make better meshes for intestinal hernia repair.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just making that up to say, like, that's how hyper specific people's interests are in academia.
Yeah.
And then you want to do these general admin jobs. And it's the business model for academia is messed up in that way. But we see it in every organization. You promote people into jobs they don't want to be in. They want to be in their content area. And let's throw training at it. And then let's look at that training and say it was unsuccessful and it was the wrong training company. Let's throw some more dollars at hiring a different training company.
Exactly. And that's why when we think about kind of where organizations are headed, and we think like it's not even I know a lot of people are more hyper aware of the need to transform the workplace because of the new generations, like the 6-7 generation, if you will. I'm a 369 girl, just so everybody's clear. If you ever want to make me happy, send me the numbers 369. But it's not just that. It's the fact that the technology is transforming, our plates as humans are transforming, right? So in the past, it would be one person at work and one person at home with the children, right? Now it's both people are working. And so you're balancing work plus, parental duties and having to, take them to T-ball and make sure you leave work early on time to go pick them up from school or schedule. Like there's a lot of things that we're balancing at one point. So the workforce is transforming because of that. And also just the technology and just the rate at which we must innovate. And so we keep trying to throw the same solution at a very different problem, right? So maybe it's that we have to stop hiring or stop promoting folks that are like, super users, if you will, into management and find another place for them and figure out a different sort of people management role and put the person who wants to manage people in that role in order to see success, right? As we have to really look at our entire infrastructure. And I do think that we're going to get there. I will, just taking it all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, we think about ROI. I personally am not hearing as much when someone says ROI, give me the financial, because I do believe that CFOs are much more sophisticated today to understand that there's complexities, right? Like, and all of those things, and we're dealing with humans. It's more of when they say ROI, they truly mean impact, right? And what are we seeing? And you don't have to necessarily give us a number. Give us, did we, give you return expectations? What is the performance? What are the stories of people that are choosing to stay because of this work that we're doing, these opportunities that we're providing? If you can provide them more of that, they can put the pieces together on the value. And that's where I think like the tool that we're working on right now is so interesting because it's really leaning heavily on highlighting the stories and highlighting the transformations that are happening within humans, within organizations, and using that as the highlight. Giving a number, right? If you absolutely need a number, sure, here it is. But really the impact is in the storytelling. And that is the future of your P&Ls, right? Is going to be, and it's not just about the bottom line number, but it's also the stories around it.
Yeah, I think you're right. People are starting to get savvy, right? That we know that ROI can't possibly give us the information that we need to get.
No.
So, but we can provide something else.
What are you most excited about as we are rounding out 2025 and going into 2026?
Well, let's see. My background has a lot of anthropology. Hold on, I'm being honest.
Don't tell me what I want to hear. Be honest. Don't tell me what I want to hear.
No, I'll tell you what I really feel for sure. With my background being a lot of anthropology in the linguistics, I really love when we start talking about culture. Yeah. And culture means something a lot broader than what most people think. And I feel as though I want to get in that culture game, right? Because it's one of those things that's hardest to measure, but I think we can do it because of these this narrative, like storytelling work.
Yeah.
I think we're a great candidate to start evaluating culture. And that just really lines up with my background. And I'm just really excited about that piece of the work, looking at like how the environment affects things and all those little squishy things that most people think are like inconsequential.
Yeah.
But I think are what actually do drive bottom line outcomes, is whether or not you have a culture that allows innovation, where people can fail often, frequently, without repercussion. We have a lot of research on this, but I think people are still just trying to figure out, how do we know if this lever that we pull, it might not necessarily be training, changes our culture. Like, how do we know what can make an impact in culture change? How that culture change drives bottom line.
Mm-hmm. If you could wish for one thing, for our audience members or viewers that are listening, that they take into like the new year and really change this one thing to make your start, what would it be?
I think the most impactful place to start would be with this return on expectations of stakeholders. That L&D gets a lot of guff for, again, not being able to fix the entire organization with one training program, but that if we can learn to be consultants outside of L&D to the rest of the business, if we can learn to speak business and get outside of our backgrounds in education and learn a little bit more about what our business wants and what our problems are, and start to consult, have this sort of consultative role in helping to define what our stakeholders really expect to see change.
Yeah.
I would say that's it. Like, really work on this return on expectations and get your stakeholders defined, get their problems defined, and then get their expectations defined. And it's kind of like the thing Jim and Wendy were saying. I think it was a 2015 article about return on expectations. I think, if you do that right, you can almost never go wrong in L&D, right? Yeah. As long as your stakeholders are happy and you've met their needs, right? So we met with a religious organization the other day, and they were saying they're donor based, and they're saying our donors never ask for ROI. They just want ROE. They really want us to meet, are we impacting lives of children? Are children, better off because they came through our program? Yeah. And that is where ROE is so much more valuable. How am I going to put a dollar value around a child's self-confidence in leadership in high school? Absolutely. They don't care about that.
They don't. And that's why I wish that my wish is that we start taking what's the ROI out of our vocabulary.
Yeah. Because it really is ROI. Why are we doing it? I'm sorry. I'm going to keep making it fun until it goes away. I'm going
to make a t-shirt for you.
Yes. Thank you.
I think because ROI has so many meanings and it's different for everybody, we come with our own assumptions of what someone means when they say, what's the ROI, right? And to your point, I may hear that and say, okay, they're asking me for a number. The CFO may say, I just want to know what's the impact, right, on the organization. Tell me a story. Tell me how many people were feel like we've changed their lives, right? And so much of our problems is why, it goes back to what I talk about in the book. This has to be evaluation cannot just be what L&D does. Everyone has to have a stake in it. Everyone has to be part of it. And we all need to be speaking the same language, because so many miscommunications happen because of, we're bringing our assumptions into what they mean when someone says something, right? And then when it's a similar word, we're both coming at it with different definitions. It becomes a challenge. So instead of saying, hey, what's the ROI? I would love for someone to say, hey, what return are we getting? What are we getting out of this?
it's
because
just
we're
our full
investing.
comprehensive return.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And sometimes when you're talking about like what it means different things to different people, sometimes they want to see an impact on their bottom line or their, on their own organization.
Mm-hmm.
But the sophisticated folks want to see the impact on their customer base. How did it change something in their customers' lives?
Mm-hmm.
If you get that, it makes marketing easier. It makes everything else easier. So like at the end of the day, companies and nonprofits, academic institutions, government, they exist to make the lives of people better in some way, or to at least make them perceive that their life is better in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, or else your organization goes away otherwise, like unless you can see a way to be impactful to your customer base. So I think that, if you don't have these sophisticated lenses to look at things, you're going to end up not getting all the way through to how is that impacting our clients' customer base.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll end up in the same cycle, right? Like we're going to end up on the same hamster wheel.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever told you this. Like 2 years ago, I did it was a keynote panel, and it was Jim and I. It was Jack and Patty from ROI Institute. It was Will Tallheimer and Judy Hale.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a powerhouse panel. It was really cool. It was humbling as hell for me to be sitting on that panel. It was like, wow. I had like a moment of like, one of these don't belong and that one is me.
The imposter syndrome or whatever
was real. Yeah. That day my imposter syndrome was real. And it was also the first time I was meeting everybody. So like, but everyone was absolutely lovely. Oh my God, absolutely lovely. But the last question was, where do you see us in 5 years? And so Jack had the microphone. Patty was sitting next to me and I said, oh, do you mind? And so I grabbed the mic and I was like, we're going to be having the same exact conversation in 5 years. And Jack was like, whoa, I can't believe she just said that. And I said, unless we start to actually really do the work to change ourselves and how we show up as L&D or how we show up as performance and how we consult, I've been here, 16, 17 years, and these are not different topics that we've been talking about, right? Like I've been since the beginning of my career, these are the same things that we're having. We have not cracked the codes. So we've got to spend the time to really do the work, or know that we're just going to continue to be in this instance where we can't prove our value. And now we're at a critical point where there is a belief that AI is going to do a lot of the things that we do, especially these like more like task-based things, right? Like developing content, and those sorts of things. The one thing AI will never take from us is our ability to build relationships and sit in front of someone and really uncover, what do you mean that you want, this is your problem, right? And really uncover what their expectation truly is. Mm-hmm. It's just, you and I have both chatted with AI. You could have a good conversation, but there's something different. Like the conversations are more deeper and meaningful when you and I are having them, as opposed to us having it with Chatty, right? Mm-hmm. And and that won't be replaced. And so we need to start focusing on those skills, the consulting up skills, so that we can survive this transformation that's coming.
Yeah. And it's about not being a passive recipient of the message that like, we need a leadership program at this level that's 16 hours long. Go make it. Mm-hmm. And then we're sitting there going like, wait, what? Why? Like what? Okay, we can go make that, or you can have AI make that, but you need a person to go back to the stakeholder and say, excuse me, what were the problems that led you to decide that this was a leadership development or leadership training program that you need? And what led you to decide that it was 16 hours and what led you to decide it was this group? And they're like, oh, because we've got this money that's sitting here and we have to do something or else it goes away in the next fiscal year. And these people are free right now in this. Okay. All right. Back up. Let's see. Did these people already just go through leadership training? Like what was the outcome of that? Like really getting underneath, those like surface level assumptions of like that this is training and this is the kind of training and that it's best done in person. And, all those things are assumptions.
Yeah. Well, but if you do have
normally just a passive recipient of that information.
Yeah. But if you do have money that's just sitting there for the end of the year that you're going to lose, I'll always take it. I will always find a way to spend money. Ask my husband. I always find a way if you have any money to spend. Amy, I want to thank you for being here. It's such a fun conversation. I love that people kind of get to see our phone calls and our Teams meetings and in real life. And so I look forward to doing a lot more of this and maybe even in person.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you all soon and have a great day, everyone. Bye.